Honestly, I'm still recovering from last episode. It was hear your story and just it was so good, and there was just a lot of things, a lot of feelings, and it was yeah, it was one of my favorite things, and it just really got me thinking. One, again, how much I appreciate you in that, but just how important it is to have a good community, have a good environment, and that would just kind of spurred me to thinking like, hey, the environment is important. We should talk about that. So here we are. I think we're going to be getting into what that means, what the environment kind of means for us, means for you, how we can use that to our advantage, things to be aware of, all these things that could just be beneficial when it comes down to it. But before we dive into that, I think one, just gotta say it out there, environment is going to be fluid. It's going to be different from day to day, hour to hour, person to person. So things are going to be jumping a little bit as you go. And as we say environment in one space, it might mean something different to you. But I think overall the themes kind of play hand in hand and they go along with each other. And then the second thing too is just they do overlap and they do play a role with one another. So we might overlap a little bit as we go on, but again, tie it off nicely at the end, and we'll just kind of talk more about it. But yeah, I think to start off, Jake, why is the environment we're in important?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you have an awful lot of confidence in us to be able to tie it up neatly and cleanly at the end.
What do you mean? We didn't spend just 30 minutes talking before we started the call.
With one more tangent. Oh, last
No.
time. Okay, last time. No, but yeah, man, the environment can, it's not that it's going to be the difference between making some gains and zero gains or whatever. In whatever, whether it's muscle growth or strength, or whether it's learning a skill or whatever, I don't think it's going to be a all or nothing kind of effect, but man, it can still be pretty powerful. Like it can really make a big difference between just kind of trudging along and like you're making some progress, but could be so much better, to where like you could be thriving, and in a lot of different domains. And like you said, it's fluid, it changes all the time, a lot of it's woven together, and it can be, there can be a lot of growing pains associated with gardening the environment that you want, right? There's sometimes you got to cut some weeds, and that hurts sometimes, and I think there's better and worse ways to do that, to approach that, to figure out what things do in fact need to be kind of pruned back, and what things we can allow to still be there, what things are actually helping us. And I'm sure there's some weed that people think is bad, but it's actually, what's the one from Lord of the Rings that's the poison cure?
Oh
I'm a fake
no, you put me on the
no.
spot.
Tolkien scholars are going to kill me.
It's
Uh,
the one, that one. Yeah, that one. I don't remember it. That basically just means we need to rewatch the trilogy, and that's another excuse. That's the whole excuse I need. So I'm going to put that on the list to do.
Yeah, I almost pulled it together with the perfect reference, but that's okay. But yeah, dude, it can be so important, really increasing how smoothly things can go, how efficiently you can get from A to B, what sort of opportunities might open up, all those kinds of things. So I guess where do we want to start? I think it probably makes sense to look at each of these different domains kind of separately, and then maybe we circle back to how they can be tied together, right? So maybe we start, the simplest one's probably training, right? So do you want to maybe kick it off with like, what sort of training environment you've found to be helpful for yourself or for clients, or how you've gone about that, frankly, the process of figuring that out, because most of us aren't going to just stumble across the perfect environment from day one.
Yeah, no, I think starting with the training makes sense, and it's one of those things where if you're new to this, is your training, or if you're only been at the same gym forever, it's really hard to know the difference the environment can make, and that's why just putting yourself out in different environments can be so beneficial. Because I think I didn't realize how much of a difference the environment can make with training until I was put in the position where I had to switch it up, right? So I think starting way back, it's like, first gym you ever go to, you're just happy to be there. So it doesn't matter too much, but it could be the difference of, like you said, just being more excited to go there, perhaps meeting a mentor, maybe even, getting exposed to more equipment or other things at an early age, and just being, excited about learning. So I think, just being open first and foremost to trying new things is important, and open to learning it can be beneficial. But specifically for training, I find it's it might it's tough because I think for me, I get so zoned in my training that like sometimes I don't realize that, oh yeah, I'm out here training with other people. But when it does make a difference, so maybe if you're more introverted in the gym versus extroverted, so to speak, and I very much can be both. So it's like, but when it comes to the training specifically, I think when I'm zoned in, what makes a difference is how other people carry themselves as well, which then is a reflection of the gym itself, right? So for to paint an example, if you go to a more just like Gen Pop gym, right? You're gonna have more Gen Pop people. There's gonna be a wider range, and not that that's bad. It's not that Gen Pop people are less dedicated or anything like that. That's not the case at all. But when you're in an environment where people also love training so much and they have these goals and they just get it,
Yeah.
you start to feel part of something bigger than yourself. And then with that comes a little bit of motivation even to continue that, because you're like, okay, now I'm representing my gym in a way too. And now I see
Yeah.
this person going hard, and I see them all like they're here at 5 a.m. every single time. Like that's cool. So like it's like, okay, I gotta make sure I'm there so that they see me too, and that I don't want to just hold myself accountable as well as them. So I think it can be that difference to just even get into the gym overall. So I think the people makes that difference. And I think recently I had switched gyms as of late. So when I came back to the States, I went to a gym and it was phenomenal. I really enjoyed it. I was there for like about a year, and I just kind of wanted something different. Right? There's nothing inherently bad about the gym, but I was just kind of maybe sick of doing the same thing all the time.
Sure.
So I was like, let me try something different. And I went to a new gym. And I think just that idea of being in a new space was exhilarating in itself. And that's another tool that we can use to our advantage. Saying like sometimes you just need to do a day pass somewhere. Sometimes you need to switch it up for a week or so, or sometimes you need to train with other people. So that's a thing there too. But I went to the gym, and then I would say it's a bit more Gen Pop than it was the more specific gym that I was at first. And I started to miss the old gym like a lot. I started to miss the same people. I started to miss how it was a bit more quiet, right? There's just less people there in general. So I missed that a bit too, because just things weren't busy. So I didn't have to navigate just moving around more people. And I missed, I just there, yeah, I just missed the gym itself. And I started to come to like a little bit of a wall where going to the gym was more of a struggle because of that,
Mm.
right? And it's when I noticed that, I was like, okay, that calls for some kind of change needed. So maybe I need to go back to my old gym. So went back there now, and is it just cemented? Day one is cemented. Like, yeah, I need to be here. And I think the big things that pointed that out was as soon as I came there, again, saw the same people. I haven't seen them in a year. Someone came up to me and was like, dude, I thought you died. I was like, oh, yeah, because I kind of left randomly because it was just spur of the moment because there were other things that were like construction going on, this happening. I just like kind of left. I was like, yeah, you know what? Just do it. Saw the same people. I got the same conversations. Saw how much progress people were making. Some new equipment was there because the owner just loves training himself too, and he's up to date with things, which I really appreciated and resonated with. So I was like, dude, like this is where I need to be. So I was like, yeah, I think in my own experience, I really noticed that as of late, and maybe another reason why I wanted to talk about it now too is because it's and now it's man, I love the gym again even more. I'm always gonna love it. It's always gonna be there, but sometimes it ebbs and flows, right? It's not always linear. It's not a straight line, and sometimes you got to navigate that. So
Yeah. 100%. Really quick, I did Google it. It's Athelas, also known as
okay.
kingsfoil.
Yeah.
It is the weed that also helps to slow the poison of the Nazgul blade.
Damn it. As soon as you said that, I just remember the water horses coming and attacking.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, but yeah, that's such good. That's so good, dude. I very much relate to that, and I very much, there's an idea like in sports, right, or just things that are competitive, where you don't really want to be the big fish in the small pond. You want to be surrounded by people that are further along than you, because then the idea is it helps to motivate you to keep pushing. And I I've kind of gone in cycles with that personally, and I think some people will thrive on that, you know. And I've had times where I thrive on that, and it's just super motivating and all that. And then there's other times where it's intimidating and it actually slows me down, and I need to be more middle of the pack or whatever, rather than there's a fly buzzing around my face, rather than being towards the bottom where I just start to feel kind of bad about myself or whatever, you know. So again, you know, it can shift over time and those sorts of things. Or even another example, like right now, we were talking before we started recording, my schedule is just crazy right now. And, you know, there are days where I'm in the lab, you know, for a long time, and there's like a little pocket of, all right, I have 1 hour where I can try to train. And so in the lab, if I can get there and do it at a certain time, and I can squeeze it in this little tiny window where I can superset 3 things and just blast through it, right? That allows me to be successful. It allows me to get it done. That's the environment I need in that moment, but it is not my ideal by any means. Like, despite the time efficiency aspect, I so greatly prefer being at an actual gym with other people around me, to where I don't even need to interact with the other people. It's just seeing others. You get that community feeling. You get that that energy that just feels good. I don't know, and so that's why I'm like, man, I just don't know if I could ever be a home gym person. It just, I like going somewhere and having that be that space where we're doing that. And I'm sure we'll talk about later about how sometimes when those streams cross, it's not always the best thing. But yeah, I don't know. That's just sort of front of my mind right now with the training environment of, sometimes what you need today is not necessarily the big picture, what you would prefer in general. Sometimes your wants and your needs can conflict a little bit, and that's okay. And that's usually, at least, is temporary. You know, not always, but sometimes it's one of those things you just kind of got to do what you got to do to check the boxes. You know, if checking those boxes is in fact the highest priority. You know, like if I wasn't in the middle of 2 shows, like I'll just train tomorrow. Like, who cares? You know what I mean? But like right now, when it's got to get done, then it's got to get done. So, yeah, I think it's shifting over time. I think sometimes just doing what you got to do, but always sort of like what you were talking through there. Also, always checking in with yourself about like, well, how does this feel? Does this, okay, things have been feeling kind of weird. Well, why do they feel kind of weird? Maybe I need a change of environment. Maybe I just go need a day pass somewhere just to kind of, you know, reinvigorate myself. Or maybe I need to change gyms for a while, and then, oh, I kind of miss that gym, I want to go back. And I miss the gym that I trained at back home so much, man. I loved that gym. It was awesome equipment. The dude who owned it was a very serious bodybuilder. He bought a ton of awesome machines. Everybody there was cool. There was a whole crew. Like, we knew everyone knew everybody. And, you know, you talk and hang out and have a good time, be social, but everyone was there to train also. So you walk in and, you know, you fist bump or you say hi or whatever, and then somebody's like, hey, I gotta go do my set real quick, and you're like, cool. Or you stop a conversation mid sentence, hey, I gotta go do and everybody gets it. Like, that was my favorite thing. It was, and I progressed so much, I think, not just as a trainee, but as a person, you know, learning social skills and whatnot and stuff, you know. So it can be great, and sometimes you have to be in a gym that's not as great as what you would like, but it can always come back around.
Yeah. I think, yeah, there's a lot of great stuff there. And I think right there at the end, when you're saying, you know, when you're talking to someone and then you're like, hey, I just got to hit a set. And it's like, they get it, right? They know. And I think that's one of the more difficult things to navigate in a gym setting is, okay, how much talking should be done? Is there too much? Is there too little? Should you go up to people randomly and ask, like, hey, why are you doing this? Or like,
Yeah.
there's some etiquette can be tough. And that can be said for just humans in general. It's just, sometimes it's just tough
Yeah.
to know stuff. But in the gym, especially too, because you're like, and maybe this is just me, but I'm just like, you know, they look zoned in. I don't want to interrupt them right now. Or it's like, yeah, they probably just don't want to talk. And it's like, and I'm afraid that I might talk too much. Or it's the other way where like there are some days where I just don't want anyone to look at me. So it's like,
Yeah.
put on the hat, put on the hoodie, and just make eye contact with no one. So it's that can be tough to navigate. But I think as like a general thing, one, people in the gym are usually very nice.
Mhm.
And like sometimes we think that they're they're not. But that's not always the case. So I think I'd rather risk that for a chance to have a very nice conversation, to meet someone new, to create even more of a community feel, than not, and kind of have that regret or potentially miss out on a really cool person. So if someone's out there and just like unsure of that, I would say just do it, right? And I think the approach is everything. Because again, someone might just be like, hey, like, I appreciate that, but right now I'm just on a time crunch because I got to go to work. So tomorrow or next time, like, let me know and we can chat then. So,
Yeah.
but just do it. I think because through those conversations, again, that's where you get those people where you see them every day again. It's like, hey man, what are you hitting today?
Yeah.
Oh, you're a couple weeks out for your show. Like, how are you doing? It's just
Yeah.
it makes that a bit more fun,
It does.
and it's always worth it. I think because again, it is a community feel,
Yeah.
and you make some
For
really cool
sure.
friends.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
when you're on the other side of it, like if someone comes to approach you or something, right? Like I think it's okay to voice a boundary and say like, hey, like, thanks, dude, but I got a lot going on. Or I'm super busy. I'm in a hurry. That like all of that is always fine. But it's also always fine to like engage in conversation. You never know. Um, I mean, there's people I've been friends with for years and years and years just because of one of these random conversations or, um, sometimes you might, especially as you get more advanced, you'll see maybe somebody comes up to ask you for advice or something. They ask you for a
Mhm.
spot or, any of those things. And I think that it's always good to come off as friendly, especially if it's, sometimes you can tell it's somebody who's brand new or something, right? And you just don't want to be that dude who kills somebody's enjoyment because they get too intimidated or anxious or whatever, right? So be nice. And it's okay to say no to doing whatever, but like, we always want to be nice and do our part to at least keep the vibes positive. We don't want to
Yeah.
like be a bad influence on anybody. But I think tied into all that stuff too is, not just the gym that you're at, the people that you're around, but other physical, or not even physical, but just other things that are at play, right? Like, does the gym have music that's fine, or do you have your headphones in, which is sort of a signal to other people that you're doing your thing, or maybe you don't have headphones in, you just want to listen to the weights, or you want to engage in those conversations, or there's even like dude, I've had this. Like, I'll see somebody wearing a Dragon Ball shirt or a Pokemon shirt or whatever, or Naruto, whatever. So like, sometimes I'm like, let me wear an anime shirt today because maybe that starts, and you never know, right? People can do that kind of stuff. So there's other like cues, other aspects to that physical environment, other to even the mental environment around training, which is a whole other can of worms, right? Just what's going on internally while you're there too, that you can have fun with, and engage or not engage with the community in whatever way feels right for you.
100%. I I exclusively only have anime and video game t-shirts because of that reason. Because it's like, well, I want people to know how cool I am, obviously. But it's
Yeah.
one of those things where it's like, if someone sees that, I know if I see that, I'm the same way. I'm like an easy way to start a conversation because it's like, all right, we're both nerds. Let's just be friends already. There's like, just to
Yeah.
start that conversation, something to relate to. And the other on that note too, you're at the gym, you have something to relate to there in itself. And I think that's super important to reiterate and know that regardless of where you are on your gym journey, you have something to relate to because we
Yeah.
all are in the pursuit of progress, right? It doesn't matter if you're a 10-year pro, 20-year pro, or you just came into the gym yesterday, right? Everyone just wants to be better, and we can all be better together, which is so important too. So that's where,
Yeah.
sometimes going and having these conversations can be helpful. But then a caveat as well is, if you're seeing new people there or other stuff, just knowing how to approach giving advice. No one really wants unsolicited advice, so that can be tough too. Always just ask, like, hey, could I give you a tip about this? Instead of saying, hey man, you're doing this wrong. Or like, let me show you this.
Right.
Right? I think again, the approach can make the difference there. But always, I think asking beforehand can be helpful too. So there's
Yeah.
that.
For sure.
But
'Cause it's easy to embarrass people, right,
yes,
without meaning to,
yeah, exactly.
and it's nobody wants that, right? No one likes, because they're all. This was me, right? I was already intimidated and kind of embarrassed to be there,
Mhm.
and then like someone's like, hey dude, you should do this when you bench. Like that's just immediately like, oh, I was doing it wrong, I'm so bad, and you shame, and
Yeah,
so we want to be cautious with
yeah.
all that kind of stuff. But I guess a question that comes to mind too is like, I think just from knowing you and talking a couple episodes ago, we talked all about your journey and all this. And I think that you haven't dealt with this a ton personally. Obviously it's come up a little bit, but not a ton, but I'm sure with clients it's come up to where their internal environment, their emotional state, their attitude towards training, maybe they're just super, super stressed, or maybe they're uh, just sad or angry or whatever from something that happened, or um, they're having a drop in motivation for an extended period of time. Things like this that are going to happen inevitably, to all of us. Maybe it's few and far between, or maybe it's all the time, or but we're all going to deal with it to some degree. And so how do you, either personally or with people you've worked with, how do you like to try to kind of navigate those things? And do you have any certain practices that you try to emphasize, or is it more of a just weather the storm, lean into what feels fun kind of thing? How do you like to do that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be very context and person dependent, but I think for most of the time, it's going to start with some kind of reflection, right? Because I think we need to address why that's happening or why you're feeling a certain way. And sometimes it's easy because it's like, well, work sucked, right?
Right.
And from there, we can then take the next step. But sometimes we just don't know. Sometimes things just feel off. So maybe we
Mm-hmm.
need to dig a little bit deeper, ask ourselves a couple of tough questions, and really sit with those thoughts, right? And I think that's a place to start there. But in general, I think just being flexible is also very important, right? Because sometimes when these times come up where, internal environment's off, that usually could lead to performance being off too. And then that could mean internal environment gets hit again because you're like, well, I did this last week. What
Yeah.
happened? So it's going to be very easy to have this negative chain reaction. So I think setting that tone early of just being flexible, auto regulation is kind of that theme too, right? Of just taking what's there on the day, right? And adjusting if you need to be within specific ranges, right? Not being very strict if I need to hit X, Y, Z reps, load, whatever it might be. Being flexible, so long as I'm here and doing around this, I'll be okay. And honestly, so long as I just take a step into the gym, tick that box, that's also a win. Because sometimes that's going to happen too. And I think one that starts very early on with yourself, but also in the coaching space of allowing yourself and clients to know that flexibility and auto-regulation is our overarching theme, so to say, right? We have a plan. Yes, it'd be great if all things are ideal and everything lines up and we hit that exactly. That's great. We'll take that. But we know that these waves are going to come. We know that it'll be ups and downs, and that's okay. So if we address that early on, that makes the approach of when it happens so much easier, right? I think that's one concept that I, brief tangent, but very related. I really like learning about people and I like learning how people think and operate. And I think one thing that's really helped me is the idea of managing expectations, right? And one thing, like a very kind of out there example is if you're going to go for a walk in the woods, right? And your friend's going to be there and they're going to scare you, right? If someone tells you, hey, like Jimmy's in the woods, he's going to pop out and scare you. You'd be like, okay, cool. You're walking through the woods and you're like, yeah, like I know Jimmy's going to pop out somewhere. Where is he? And then he scares you. You might get a little fright. You're like, whatever. That's cool. But you knew it was going to happen. So it almost dampens the effect in a way because you're prepared for that. You're accepting that this is a reality. It's very true. So, and maybe even you have tools ready for it. Maybe you're ready to scare them back. Maybe you're ready to do whatever, right? It just mitigates things in a sense. But if you didn't know that, and you maybe even on the other end of the spectrum where you're like, there's no possible way that someone's going to be in the woods or something bad's going to happen. When it happens, it hits really hard and it can be harder to get out of that. So I think that relates a lot here of just knowing how to manage expectations in general, and right, just knowing and allowing things to be flexible. Does that kind of make sense? That kind of
Yeah,
like, yeah,
100%. And
yeah.
that, again, just like all this other stuff, that stuff can shift over time. I've been thinking about this for myself quite a bit recently because it's, with where I'm at with competing right now, it's sort of it's the boxes have to be checked, right?
Mhm.
Um, if if I want to have my best possible showing on the stage, the boxes have to be checked. If I'm okay with some sort of trade-off, cool. But right now I'm sort of in a space where it's like I've worked so hard so long, like I don't want that trade-off. I'm going to get it done. But so in a situation that context, now, I show up to train. If I'm just tired. I don't want to be here. I do my first set. It just feels horrible. All this, I'm going to do it anyway. Right. Whereas if I'm deep off season, I'm going home. I'll come back
Yeah.
tomorrow. Right. Like it's not worth the ego hit of having to pull back quite so much. It's not worth, for me, and we've talked about this a little bit before, that, I had that big chunk of time a couple of years ago where my motivation to train was super, super low. And during that period of time, the more bad training sessions I had, the more it deepened that feeling. So I had to be really cautious of, like, if it just felt horrible, I'm going home. Right. So that how you prepare, how you manage those expectations, how you react to what happens when you go to do that first set, that also changes over time. But like you're saying, knowing the context at the time and planning accordingly. If it feels like this, here's what I'm going to try to do. If that's not possible, here's plan B. Like, that's that sort of thing, I think, can be.
So you have this flow chart essentially, right? Where it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
if there's not this, then this. If not
exactly.
this, perhaps this. And
Yeah.
it's that's almost infinite in a sense. You have a general idea and a plan, like you said, and maybe you have ABC plan. But then something comes up, you're like, those don't fit. It's time for D plan and wherever that
Yeah.
is. So it's a flow
100%.
chart like mentality kind of helps me a lot too,
Yeah.
because it's just knowing when to go to the next arrow, the next box.
Yeah,
If this
exactly.
happens, then this. So
Yeah. And if that feels stressful, like, you can write it down.
yeah, yeah,
You don't have
exactly.
to keep everything logged up here. You have a spreadsheet or a piece of paper that your training is written on or whatever, right? Just jot it down. Like, hey, if it feels like this, here's adjustment number 1 or whatever. That way you don't have to store it in your brain, and you can just kind of react without doing all the extra decision making kind of stuff. 'Cause sometimes that gets fatiguing in and of itself, right?
Yeah, and I think I'm really glad you said it like that, because us talking about having these plans and contingencies and stuff, that itself can be overwhelming, right? Especially if someone is pretty
Mm-hmm.
new to it, or they maybe haven't faced these difficulties yet. Um, just getting thrown, hey, this is all that can happen. You got to have all this ready. It doesn't have to be that way. Again, we came to a spot with our own training with our clients where we've just been through it. We've been through those experiences. We've kind of created that toolbox of things that we know can occur and go from there. And there's stuff we also still don't know about
Mm-hmm.
ourselves and our clients. And once that happens, we'll sit with it. We have, again, our pillars maybe we'll go to in terms of what we're seeing is being affected. We have some rough idea, but even then we have to create and adapt as we go. So I think, again, managing that expectation of you're not always going to have the answer. Things are always going to be variable, but framing that as we're always going to be learning. Even if we hit this wall, again, we're going to come back with it and come back with more information and more skills. And if we hit this thing again, but yeah, we've been here before. We can do this.
Yep. 100%. I think the last thing that comes to mind for me with the training environment stuff is training partners or lack thereof. Or, we mentioned kind of having a group around, and, maybe there's that social environment, the community aspect, but that can be different from like a training partner, right? Which doesn't necessarily mean you're doing the exact same program or anything like that, but just you're there together, right? And you're kind of going through stuff together. Maybe you're doing similar exercises, but different loads or different numbers of sets or something. Or maybe you're even doing different exercises, but you're still there. You're going to spot each other when you need it. You're going to support each other. You're going to, provide that encouragement during a set to help someone push to a true 1 RIR or something, right? That's something that I have had sort of a back and forth relationship with. I when I was powerlifting, having somebody there to spot me was, huge. There's even research on that. People tend to perform better when somebody's there to spot them. And so in powerlifting, when your performance and the load on the bar matters a whole lot, that's helpful. Now, I almost just find it distracting a lot of the time. And it's especially now that time is scarce. Like, I want to move, I want to be able to kind of do my thing. And so, like, right now is not the ideal time for me to have a training partner or something. Could my performance benefit from it? Yeah, maybe, but it's just not worth the overall trade-off thing. But I guess what I'm trying to say is there's pros and cons both ways. And so what you choose, what direction you choose, completely depends on you and the context at the time, and what people are there around you that might, maybe no one wants to do that, right? Maybe nobody has this, their schedule doesn't line up, or they're just not the personality type to like yell at you while you're doing a set of leg press or whatever it is. And that even for me, man, like I can be that person, but I can't be that all the time.
Yeah.
Like it gets exhausting. I do that in the lab all the time. It gets exhausting. Or like I can be the person who's on the other side and has somebody yell at me. And sometimes it's awesome. Like my girlfriend and I have done this sometimes where we'll do that, or we'll like be the old school bodybuilders and like palpate the muscle while the other one's doing their seated rows or whatever. And it can be super fun. I don't want to do it every session. It's just exhausting, and I want to be able to just get and do my thing, So, anyway, that's sort of my experience with that. I think everyone's kind of different. I'd love to hear your perspective too. And it's just another one of those things to consider, but don't feel like you have to go one way or the other. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just think about the pros and cons of what does the environment feel like when there's somebody else there with you versus when you're there alone, and what feels, like the biggest net win.
Yeah. I think that's very well put. Again, it's tough because I don't know which one I like. If you were to ask me right now, especially, I really don't know, because I think I've never had a dedicated training partner. And when I've trained with others, there are times when it went really well, and there's other times where it's like maybe you try to avoid certain people in the gym because, like you said, again, it might be too much, it might be distracting, it might be maybe a net negative in a sense, right? So I think it's tough to say exactly, but I think I'm very much on board with the idea of it being flexible and being dependent on the day, which then means a good training partner is one that you can communicate effectively those feelings, and also knows when to slap you on the back if you need it, but also to leave you alone when you need to, right? So I think one, just effectively communicating that with yourself, but also a potential training partner is important, and both being on that same wavelength and knowing each other is helpful. So yeah, I think I do miss it a little bit, of having some tracks like back in New Zealand. So some of the training sessions I had were just phenomenal because it was a mix of we're just laughing, having a good time, just talking about anime or just listening to anime songs, whatever it is. It's a lot of fun. And we were good at separating and then going into our working set. Or maybe it was back at FAU when me and Joey Carzoli would play chess in between sets. Like that was so cool. That was fun, right? So I think it can be flexible. Right now, I think I'm embracing the meditative state I get into in training. So I like being alone. And that was enhanced via getting noise canceling headphones for the first time. Oh, such a big difference. I know you mentioned music earlier before, and I was like, dude, it's a game changer when you like have noise canceling and you feel super zoned in. And that also helps that there's only 2 other people in the gym and it's super early in the morning. And I'm like, oh, this is something else. I like this. So I'm very much in that sense now where I'm embracing that as much as I can.
I love it. Yeah. It's, even if it's like a one-off thing also, like you said, some of those training sessions just being so fun. Like I've had that, with the FAU guys, and it's a fun group to just hang out with, and you're lifting and you're having fun, and like I don't want to do that every day, but every once in a while is cool. Or I've gotten to train with my coach a couple of times, and it's like it's fun, but it's also like I learned a ton, and it's like it's this weird, there's some stuff you can't learn from studies or from, you'd learn it eventually just training yourself and trying different things or whatever, but you get to go train with somebody who's been lifting for 20 years or what, like they have wisdom, so you can, if you get an opportunity like that can be really cool or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like we're saying, just try different stuff, see what feels right for you, be open to changing your mind on that over time and shifting around and being fluid. And at the end of the day, there's no right or wrong answer, right? You're just kind of doing your thing. And so
100%.
I think we've beat that horse well enough. So now maybe we go to the nutrition side, kind of the stuff with that. So how do you want to kick off the nutrition stuff? Do you think maybe
it's
like
tough? It's tough because I think a lot of times too, people, right? They always say, "Oh, the training is the easy part, and the nutrition is the hard one." And I think I would agree, because it's training can be separated pretty easily. It's like, here's this hour session, here's this 2 hour session in my day. That's it. Whereas nutrition could theoretically be the 22 hours outside of the gym,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there's a lot more to consider. But I think when we're looking at like just practical applications of nutrition and environment, it comes down to like a couple of main things. I think that the first thing is one, just like food availability in a sense, right? Knowing like what's around. I know like for me, right, just knowing like Oreos, that's the weakness, man. It's annoying because they're not that good, like in reality. But if that you just keep eating them, there's more
I
shit.
get
Like,
it.
yeah, I have one, it's hard to have another. So like sometimes just being able to know what's around me can be helpful. If I just have a ton of fruit and vegetables, I'm more likely to eat that because it's around, right? And I think just being able to if you're fortunate enough to be in the spot where you can control that environment, I think that's something to touch upon. So yeah, I'm curious of like what that looks for you, like food
Mhm.
availability and managing that environment. I
Big,
mean,
yeah.
especially for you right now, you're like, dude, that's
Yeah, I mean, it's pretzels for me, by the way.
yeah.
That's mine. Um, but yeah, I think that the like you said, if you can control that, because you can't always control it, right? If you live
Exactly.
with your parents, for example, you can't really tell them like, "Hey guys, we can only have these things in the house." It just that's not going to go very well. Um, but if you can control it, it's just it's kind of just like not putting yourself in position to be unsuccessful, right? Like just not sabotaging yourself. Like we've both been dieting, right? So I'm sure we both are buying slightly different things than what we might otherwise buy. And like for you it's Oreos, for me it's pretzels, and other stuff that I'm just not going to keep it in the house because I just don't want to deal with the temptation or whatever, and every every big refeed that I've done, or the last peak week, I'm going to have to do it again for this one. I've had to go to the store to buy things specifically for that, which is a little bit annoying, but it's also very worth it because it's just made it so much easier to stay on track. Um, so I love that you started there. I think that's super, super important. And it kind of works the opposite way too, right? If you're trying to gain weight, that make sure you have enough food. Like some people, some of these lucky people who are, maybe a little bit faster metabolism than you or I, where they need to eat some junk food to get enough calories in or whatever. Make sure that you have those resources, because the last thing you want is to, you're spending so much energy training super hard. You got to make sure that you're capitalizing on that. You're actually giving your body the resources it needs to,
Yeah.
to grow and all that. So it works both ways.
Yeah. To speak on my experience with that, when I was in New Zealand, living with friends, basically a bunch of bodybuilder and powerlifters. So that was so easy because we're
Yeah.
going grocery shopping together. And we're like, bro, chicken's on sale this week. We're stocking up the freezer. And we're
Yep.
like, yeah. And then, we're eating roughly the same things. And for like, maybe I bake cookies for the house because I like baking. And I'm like, let's have some cookies. It's cool.
Yeah.
It was so easy. But then I came home and I'm living with my parents, and I I have good habits. I was pretty certain I'd be all right, but it was hard, man. And it took me a long time to get into a good spot where I can manage it appropriately. Because I was just
Hmm.
like, oh, especially being in a different country, right? I was like, oh, well, we didn't have this in New Zealand. I could have some of this.
Yeah.
Parents have this around. Cool. Let me snack on this. It is just impossible to say no to grandma's food because she would be so
Oh
sad.
man.
So it's like, so it was tough, and I think I did pretty poor job looking back on it. But I was glad to do that. Looking back, obviously, in the time, I was like, "Ah, oh, this is tough." But I think I needed to, quote unquote, fail in this sense so that I could really just reassess and learn. Because
Yes.
now,
Yes.
it's so easy. Like I'm dieting now, and it's so easy to say no. Like I really just don't want some of this stuff. Things can be around, and that's completely fine. And thankfully, I was never in a spot where I was like, "Mom, Dad, you better not buy this." One, I would never do that. Two, I don't think anyone should do that. But three is like, I never had that desire to either, right? So it was
Yeah.
very easy for me to see all these foods and just to be okay with not having them. And I think again that really just goes back to the reflection part of things, right? So when I would see these foods or be faced with a choice, essentially, I would just really just sit on that thought and reflect, saying, okay, do I really want this food? Like, do I really, really want it? Sometimes it was yes, and then I
Hmm.
had it. Sometimes it was like, no, because I could technically have this food anytime. And I just don't want it right now. It doesn't really fit in line with my goals, so I'm okay with not having it right now. I'd rather just have my other food, right? So I think I had to go through a lot of those repetitions of that reflection, of that self-talk, of navigating that space, and now it's just so easy. And it's I kind of refer to it as just being respectful to my palate in a sense, right?
Yeah,
Because also like, yo, I'm not gonna get Taco Bell. Like, it's not good. I'm sorry if I hurt anyone's feelings, but this is not good.
I
It's
agree.
not worth the
Very
calories. Like,
overrated.
I I'd just rather have something else. I really have something else. If I wanted something, then I would have it. Like I said, and I
Yeah.
think just again coming from the point of just respecting a palate and also respecting good quality food has been helpful too. And specifically, what I mean by that is, again, like I said before, I love baking, which is again, it's fun. It can be tough because sometimes you want all this other stuff. But I got to a point where I don't want Oreos because they're not good. They're just my cookies that I make, my Levain like mock recipe cookies are so much better.
Yeah.
But I will only have them if I make them. I will only make them if the ingredients are around. I'll only get the ingredients if I really want the cookies. So
Yes.
again, I had to get to that point, and again, it took some time. So I'm not saying like, dude, it's so easy. It took some time and practice to get to that spot where I'm like, just having these thoughts in its second nature, being respectful to myself, really trying to figure out if it's in line with my goals or figure out if I just really want the food. And again, it's okay to sometimes be like, damn, I just really want this because maybe I won't have another chance to have this. And that's okay
Yeah.
because I'm far out from competitions and that's fine. So using context, using skills, practicing gets you to a point where you're better at navigating this. You'll never be perfect and we don't want to be perfect, but it's going to take some intention and thought and practice.
Yes. Wow, dude. Okay. That was amazing. There's so much good stuff there, and I just want to highlight a couple things. Right. One, at the beginning when you talked about how you had to like fail to learn the lesson, I relate to that very strongly. Right. My first attempted contest prep that ended in 2020, that everything locked down. I moved back with my parents for a little bit. Just like you, they have everything, and it was so hard. Right. Like I struggled so bad with that rebound that I think it connects to like sort of I just relate to that experience and how important that is to get that learned experience so that you can then, what didn't work. So now you can try some new things in the next time. But it also connects to another idea that you brought up about this idea of you can have that food anytime. I think when we've been dieting, especially for a while, you get this scarcity mindset of like, oh, I gotta have those Doritos or these, for me, it was these pretzels or these, ice cream, whatever it is, that it feels so like I haven't had this in so long. I need it. I have to have it now before I can't have it again. It's always there, dude. Like it's okay. It's always going to be there, and I think that can kind of help to make different decisions sometimes. And the flip side of that, sometimes it's not always going to be there. Sometimes it's grandma made a cake for your birthday. Have a piece of the cake, dude. Like I don't. It doesn't. Sometimes you got to do that. It's very, very worth it. And I think making those decisions as rationally as you can is a skill, and it takes some learning, right? Of failing, making mistakes, and then you learn, and then you make mistakes again, and then you learn some more, and it's this constant process. But I think that's so huge. And then the last piece to highlight is I think the idea that you can put barriers up, right? So like you mentioned about, you don't really want the Oreos because you can make these cookies that are so much better, but you can only make them if you have the ingredients, and you're only going to buy the ingredients if you have decided like I want to be able to make these. And so you can do that sort of thing. You can also do, like for me, I take advantage of the fact that I hate spending money. So like I just I'm just not going to go out to eat that much. And like that's a barrier that I can have in place that helps me, that I make sure that the food I have in the house is stuff, like for example, when I come out of this contest prep, I want to make sure the food I have in the house is stuff that is conducive to me being successful with that process, knowing that I can go out to a restaurant, absolutely, and I'm sure I will, but it will be a conscious decision of walking past that barrier that's already there, because I have decided that this is in fact what I want to do, and this is in fact worth it in this scenario. So I think all those things are very important, very well said, and I'm glad you brought them up.
No, yeah, of course. And I just want to touch upon the last point too, and carry on what you're saying. It's going out to eat is also overrated. Again, and when you come to that reality and you just embrace how beneficial learning how to cook is,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna do it. You're gonna save money. You're gonna eat better food more frequently. You're going to be able to tailor that based on your needs too. If you're bulking, you can add in more stuff. If you're dieting,
Yep.
you can adjust that, right? Like I have a really good chicken tender recipe that I just throw in the air fryer, and it's like super simple. But if I'm craving fried chicken, which I love fried chicken, I usually don't have the calories for it, but this version scratches that itch, and I
Yeah.
just come to the spot where I can learn. Okay, this is a good substitute, right? I'm not removing it completely or saying that it is bad. It's just like, and I end up wanting that more often because it's just better, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, that's good. But again, it's learning to cook is so important. It really is. And then again, you could still go out. Like I have, again, being like just a couple of spots where I'll go to. Like I have an ice cream spot. I have a like Greek spot, and I have an Asian spot. That's pretty much it. Anything else, I'm very very late to get because one, I'm like I could probably make it better at home, or at least try to, and that's a challenge I'd like to take. So cool, let me try to
Sure.
make this version, but make it better or make it more appeal to how I like. Because a lot of times I like getting more protein in, so I want more meat. But you go out to buy it, and it's like $40 for a plate, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, what?
Yeah.
Just-
Yep.
so again, just I think learning to cook can be very beneficial. You're gonna That's gonna help with navigating going out to eat places. You're gonna save some money too. It can be fun, right? Because then, especially if you're cooking for others, or you have other people involved, you can get them involved too. Again, like going back to the baking thing, baking for other people is so fun. Like I just
Yeah.
love it. It's like, hey, I made these cookies for you, just cause.
I love that.
You're like,
Yeah.
oh, that's cool.
I love it.
And
It's
it's
so
like
wholesome.
it's such a great thing, right? Because again, I think if we get back to the spot where food is also an integral thing, because when you think about it, especially like years back, it was more so of a thing where like you get together and you eat food together. That's less common nowadays, which is sad. And I think it's maybe
Mhm.
even less common if you look at like like just bodybuilders or people in resistance training, because maybe they feel like they're so different that they can't engage in these things.
Yeah.
But if we start to just open ourselves up more and bring it back to the table, so to speak, it's gonna be it's gonna be nice. It's gonna be a cool thing. So maybe it's a challenge for people out there to do it. Like, hey,
Yeah.
here's this cake I made. Yeah, if you want the macros, here it is. Because technically, I could always, if you're controlling the ingredients, you could always get the macros too,
Sure.
right? The cookies I make probably don't want the macros because the fat's super high because there's a lot of butter in it. But if I really wanted to, I could. And that's where, again, going to the spot where you're learning how to do these things, you have so much room and flexibility, which then can line up with where you're at in your training, your
Mm-hmm.
mind space, your context, all this. So it just comes back to knowing how things work, fitting it in where you're at,
Yeah.
adjusting as you go.
Yeah. 100%. Think that leads really nicely into the idea of like navigating being around people who could not care less about bodybuilding, about nutrition, about any of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is very hard for most people, right? This is probably the number one question that I get from clients about like, how do I do this birthday party, or how do I do this wedding, or how do I, like, my husband and my kids just, they want to have all this other stuff, but like I'm trying to stay on track with this thing, or it's so difficult because, like you said, like food is, it's such a social thing, it's such a ingrained thing that we do together. It can be so comforting, it can be so fun. I think all that is great. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Obviously it can be taken to an extreme, and if all of your comfort comes from food, that might not be the best thing. But there's nothing wrong with going out for wings with the boys because it's fun, you know um, but navigating that can be very, very difficult, and that's probably helpful for us to talk about, what things we found to be successful with clients and with ourselves. So I guess maybe I'll throw one out and then we'll pass it over to you, and we can kind of, I don't know, bat some things around a little
Yeah.
bit. But I think first and foremost, not like, don't be annoying with it. You know what I mean? Like, other people should not have to suffer because you have chosen a certain goal, right? So you have chosen to embark on a fat loss journey. That's awesome. that doesn't mean that your family also chose to do that for themselves, and it doesn't mean that they signed up to listen to you complain about it all the time. And they should, I think the goal should be, let's have other people feel as unaffected as humanly possible. And most of the time, you can completely do that. If you're doing a contest prep, people they're gonna notice, but we want to minimize it as much as possible. But I think, to me, that's usually like step number one, mindset wise, because that can kind of guide you into a lot of ways of behaviors of how to actually achieve that. And we can mention some of those behaviors, but conceptually speaking, at least, I think that's a very helpful framework of like, this is my thing. I'm not going to impose this on other people. Sometimes that means I'm going to eat different food from other people. That's okay. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. This is just what I'm doing. That's what they're doing. That's awesome. And we're just going to move on.
Yeah. I think that's a very good way to put it, and a good approach to it off the start, right? Because I think if you start with that, everything else kind of falls in place as well, right? Because you're just coming out of it of a place of compassion, right? For others, but
Yeah.
importantly yourself too, where it's like, okay, like it's like that meme, and you're in the back of the room saying, they don't know them prepping for a bodybuilding show.
Yeah.
You got your Tupperware and you're eating it, right? It's like, you don't want to be that person, because then again, it could be, you could take away fun from other people, and that's not good. So I think, yeah, that's a great place to start. And I think it's gonna come up, like you said, are people gonna notice and they're gonna say stuff. And one thing I always like to give as a point of action and to help with is just be open about talking about it, right? And saying like, hey, like, I'm on this cool journey. This is what it's all about, right? Again,
Yeah.
trying to find that line where it's not making it so self-centered or all about you in that sense, but like, hey, like, letting people know what's going on, so maybe they have a little bit better of an understanding, so perhaps that they could just be okay with it for themselves and then also for you, right? Because you don't want to have people just on. It can be tough to navigate it. People are like, bro, why do you have Tupperware? What are you doing? Or like, do you just have the piece of cake?
Yeah.
But if they know, like, okay, this person has these goals they're about, they don't even need to know anything about bodybuilding or in general. But if someone's just very passionate about this goal and they have these things that they want to do, most people that you choose to be around are going to be like, yeah, we want to also see them succeed. So we're going to just do our best to not affect them too. So I think coming from a place of compassion, coming from a place of educating and teaching others too, right? Because maybe you inspire some other people in a sense too. Again, maybe not, but that's maybe a little bit hopeful. But if you're coming from a place that's like, this is what I'm doing, it can be cool because maybe these people are excited about that as well. So I think that's one thing I always like to do is like let people know, just be upfront about it, be honest. Don't be weird about it. Just like a general theme. Don't be weird about it.
Yeah.
And
We're
then
weird enough,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just so yeah.
Yeah, I think that's super important. It's like any way that you're relating to other people, right? You got to communicate your needs and your boundaries, and you want to do that in a compassionate and kind way, of course, right? Which isn't always easy. Sometimes, especially when we're first starting out on these journeys, I think it's easy for some people, and I was like this, that I thought it was super cool. And I was like, subconsciously, I was almost like I was flexing by saying I was on a diet, or I was like, yeah, you should kind of feel bad that you're eating pizza while I'm having chicken and broccoli. Like, come on, dude, take care of yourself, which is so lame and so stupid. But it happens, right? So I think trying to be empathetic and aware to that extent that we don't need to make other people feel weird about what they're doing. They're doing their thing, and you can do your thing. And communicating what you're doing, and you don't, you not feeling bad about saying no to something is a skill that takes some practice. Some people, well, here, let me back up for 1 second. Most people are going to be super cool with it, right? They're just going to be like, oh yeah, I didn't know you were dieting. Cool. Do your thing. They don't care, right? Usually they just want to hang out with you. The food is there but like the main thing is the social interaction. They're just glad that you're there. It gives you something else to talk about, whatever. Some people are not going to react quite that way. And that can then, maybe that's some food for thought on what, how supportive is this person towards your goals? Maybe it's food for thought on, well, how did you communicate your goals? Maybe it's your fault that they're sort of on their heels or whatever. there's other, culturally, there are some cultures where that food is extremely important, and it's offensive to refuse the food, right? So that's a whole different thing sometimes, where you need to, maybe you're adjusting other things so that you can have some of that food, and sort of, socially and culturally have all of that stuff go well, to not disrupt that part of your life, to not disrupt the other person's, not disrupt grandma's life who cooked you this thing, but you're still on track with your goals because I adjusted other stuff, so depending on the situation, it's like everything we talked about, right? It all is so situation dependent, where that's what's going to help to guide you on which things you adjust to make sure that that environment is such that you can be successful in the grand scheme.
100%. I think that's a great way to wrap that up, put a nice bow on it. And I think, like you said, the general theme is that where it's nutrition is probably gonna be a bit harder, but that just means more stuff to learn. It means being a bit more okay with hitting some walls, but learning and navigating that, and then just adjusting as you go. And it's always going to change. So I think, yeah,
Yeah.
that was a really nice way to put it.
Maybe really quick before
Mhm.
I'll untie that bow just a hair. What's maybe it might be helpful to throw out a couple concrete examples.
Mm.
We talked about just communicating, bringing your own separate food if that's what it takes or whatever. But I think, mentioned adjusting other things. You can do. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with that, right? Like you can just be. Let's say you're going to dinner for this thing, and you either you feel you need to eat that food for whatever reason, or you want to eat that food for whatever reason. It's just a conscious decision that you're making. The rest of the day, you can adjust all that stuff, right? You can keep it more protein, veggies, lower carb, lower fat, so you can enjoy that meal a little bit more. You can also do things where maybe something that I found sort of paradoxically to be helpful for me, it's a hard word, is when I first started out dieting and stuff, right? Like what I would do is I would eat very little the rest of the day so I could enjoy that dinner. What has worked so much better for me is have a smallish breakfast, eat right before I go to the dinner.
Mm.
And then I can have something, but I'm just not going to eat that much because I'm not hungry,
Yeah.
and like I still show up, I still have fun with everybody, I still have a little bit of the food, but it just I'm not starving and therefore binge eat. I can it's much more manageable. Um, you can do stuff even with different days. Maybe today's going to be a higher calorie day for that reason. Okay, well, I'll just lower my calories by a couple hundred tomorrow, or by 100 the next 3 days, or there's endless possibilities of ways that you can do that. But I think that having some of those options in your toolbox can be helpful. But at the end of the day, it's all the stuff we're talking about of what is the situation, what's the decision that makes the most sense for my current context, and then adjusting however needed to kind of do that thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. I think another easy thing or another way to approach it too, is a lot of times menus and stuff will be online. So you can kind of go ahead
Yeah.
and pick ahead of
Yes.
time. So,
Yes.
and even some places will have calories and macros online too, which is fantastic. But if not, that's also okay. You can give your best guesstimate, because at least it's going to give you somewhere to work with, because then you can work
Yep.
backwards from that, right? Like, okay, my meal's roughly going to be about 1,000 calories. I have X amount of calories that I hit for the day. Then I can plan roughly around that too. Right.
Yep.
So I think there's that option. And like you said too, just adjusting for the day, but importantly the week, right? Because again, if we're looking more about trends and averages and things like that, maybe we have refeeds already integrated within our
Mm-hmm.
training or in our nutrition. So maybe if we frequently go out to eat Saturday and Sunday and the weekends, maybe we also make those our refeed days, right? Just because it
Yeah.
fits better with our schedule. It makes it more likely like, hey, we can really just enjoy stuff more. We can go out and do all these things and still be in line with our goals. Maybe during the week we have to adjust and have a little bit lower calories, sure, but our weekly average is still where we need to be. If the refeeds help positively for extra food, extra training on that Monday is going to be great. Maybe put a harder session on that Monday too, right? And then you also just feel good and you feel like you can accomplish things. So I think there's so many ways that you can make it beneficial as well too, right? And I think taking a step back and looking at the greater scheme of things, like your weekly setup of nutrition and even training, can help with that too. Because sometimes, again, I just like working backwards from stuff. If I know an event's coming up or I know this, then I can just work there and go like that. So for me,
100%.
that's how I like to approach it too.
100%. Um, So I think the next point we were planning to move to, I kind of feel like we could do a whole episode on that, to be honest.
Okay, yeah.
'Cause it's kind of a can of worms.
It
Since
is.
we've been talking for a minute, I think it might make sense as I break the fourth wall to
Oh god, they're gonna hear
skip
this.
or circle back
Yeah.
to that point maybe in the future, just so we're not on this episode's not 3 hours long. And
Understood.
I think a good way to wrap up, maybe, because we've woven this in with everything, but it's also sort of its own separate thing, is the people that we surround ourselves with. And we've touched on, the different people in your training environment, whether they're strangers or friends or training partners or what have you, and how that stuff can impact you, the friends and family and whatnot that you might eat meals with, and all of that stuff is what it is. We've discussed that at length here, but it also matters the rest of the day, because there's only so much of the day that we're spending lifting or eating meals, but we're probably going to be around other people at other points, maybe a large part of the day or maybe not very much or whatever, but it matters nonetheless. So um, how have you felt the impacts of these other people, that even just beyond training nutrition stuff, and how that is positively or negatively impacted, sort of indirectly, those bodybuilding goals?
Yeah. It's tough because it's kind of a harsh reality in a way, right? Where we come to face where we we really have to be aware of how precious our time and energy is. And sometimes we don't know that until we're really faced with it, where we're super busy or
Yeah.
we don't have time. It's just like sometimes you get hit really hard with that. So I think if people are able to get ahead of that, it's going to be just more beneficial. Again, just expectation management, being aware of these things, setting a rough plan. So I think with that, in the idea of just choosing who you surround yourself with, you do have that choice for the most part. Again, of course, there'll be contexts where we can't. But I think speaking of when we can, some people really don't realize you can you can choose that, and I think we need to respect that choice a little bit more because it does have a very big impact, right? And it can be very negative, and it can be very positive,
Mm.
but it ultimately comes down to the choice to respect yourself and say like, yes, these people are good for me, or no, these people aren't good for me. And
Yeah.
it's tough because maybe the people that aren't good for you have some good things that you like, and you're like, oh, I don't know though. There's this, then this, but like, what's that net? What's that net gain or even net loss, right? So I think we have to really face that. And again, maybe a bit of a challenge for people to go out and face, but it needs to be done because I think if we can get on that early, we can just benefit more and enjoy life more.
Yeah.
Right? And because I think, like you had said, if something happens where we're constantly in a setting where there's certain people that just affect your mood, even again, maybe you don't even have interactions with them, but you
Hmm.
see them and something about it is just a lot. Sometimes it happens, right? Maybe there's the way they speak, whatever it is. And again, not being like in a sense that like, oh, this person, whatever, in a hateful way. It's just like there's something that can be negative. It could be that they are negative themselves, right? Their approach, their mindset is so negative that it starts to bleed out onto other people and affect that, right? And it starts to bring you down. And if
Yeah.
you're down when you go to training's not gonna be great. Things won't be great. So I think it's tough, but it's a thing that we need to face. And I think it's, as we are older people now, wise old age, we come to appreciate that. And I think on that note as well, being okay with making those decisions, it's not selfish. Maybe I'm saying that to myself too. It's not selfish, but it's not because it's
Yeah.
you can't pour from an empty cup. You do have to take care of yourself, importantly too, right? And not in a selfish way. So I think we need to embrace that a little bit more, and again, be intentional about those thoughts and about those actions. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Facts. I love that you started that with that. It's about self-respect also at
Mhm.
the end of the day, of knowing that you deserve to be around certain qualities and people, and it's like that cliche, right? Of you're what is it? You're the sum total of the people you spend the most time around, 5 people or 3 people or
Mhm.
whatever number of people they say. People have more friends than I do. I don't have 5 people. Uh, no, but it's a cliche for a reason, man. It's true. You know, we start to kind of chameleon ourselves and reflect the people and the energy that we're around. And um, you're absolutely right. We absolutely deserve to tailor that in a way that helps us be successful in whatever we're trying to do. It doesn't have to be bodybuilding, right? Business, it can be whatever it is. And that's, yeah, that's just very well said. I love that. And it's not always comfortable in either direction, right? Obviously, if you need to make some of those harder decisions of like, man, you're fun, but you're just bogging me down, and it's really holding me back from doing what I want to do truly within myself with my life.
Yeah.
It might be you might have a hard conversation of just like, I love you, bro. I love hanging out with you, but like, I really need this thing to change. And maybe together you can constructively find a way to do that and still be homies and all that. Maybe you're just not compatible with somebody. That's sad, but it's okay. Better to know that now than 10 years from now when you're still in the same spot. So that stuff can be uncomfortable, but it can also be uncomfortable even if it is somebody you want to be around you, right? Like, to me, this is going to sound so funny, but like, my relationship with my girlfriend's like that sometimes. That she's very special in her ability. I told her before we even started dating, I was like, you are the most alive person I've ever met in my life. She feels everything so strongly. She's incredibly empathetic, and she's very knowledgeable with relationship dynamics of all sorts, not just romantic, but friendships, etc. And so I have learned so much from just being around her all the time that has made me face things about myself that have been very difficult, very uncomfortable, very hard to go through. But it's like she makes me a better person, and it's so like, I want that, and she's just fun to hang out with. She's cool, whatever.
Yeah.
But like that, sometimes it's not always sunshine and rainbows. That's okay. But it's, at the end of the day, is it leading to the progression that you want? Is it leading to the education that you want, to the work environment that you want, to the bodybuilding that you want, to all these sorts of things, so I think that's, I don't know, it's at least helpful for me to know that just because something's hard here and there, sometimes that's good for you, and sometimes that is really what you want. And it kind of goes back to how we started this with like the gym that you're in. You don't always want to be the biggest dude or the strongest dude there. Sometimes you want to have that thing that forces you to grow and expand. And if that is in fact your goal, to grow and expand in that way. But yeah, I don't know.
I think, yeah, I really like that. And I think, like you had said, it really just comes down to facing yourself and having those discussions with yourself. And again, coming from a place of respect and sitting with those thoughts. And again, that's really hard, but it's really important, and it needs to be done. And I think sometimes too, it's because when you talk about the environment, sometimes people are like, well, I'm a loner and I like to be alone. I think that's also okay, right? Because there will be times where you're going to be alone, especially, I mean, dude, we're doing like a PhD in this very specific thing, in this very specific resistance training. And it's like, sometimes you feel that, right? And sometimes you're in these niches or whatever it is. But being alone doesn't always mean like lonely, right? And I think embracing that time with yourself is also so important.
Yes.
Like, because again, there'll be times where you'll never get that, right? Like maybe you're just always around people all the time in this position you're in, or whatever it is, which can be fantastic. But if you're in the position where you maybe are relying a lot more on yourself than others, and try to embrace that, try to use that to your advantage and really learn about yourself, right? Like go into that arc and just like self-growth to the max, right? And I think on that flip side too, that does not mean to put up walls and to always be alone and to negate any possibility of conversations with others or letting people in. Because again, I know sometimes people have to put up walls every now and then to get hurt or whatever it is. And I think that can be done. But again, kind of going back to what I said early on, sometimes taking that risk can be worth it, right? Having that discussion with someone in the gym can be worth it. It's similar here, where if we're always behind these walls, we miss out on some beautiful things, right? I mean, Attack on Titan, that's what it's all about, right? The walls.
Gotta go through the ocean, bro.
Yeah, exactly. So like,
yeah,
don't put up walls. Do the inner work. Try to just really challenge yourself, reflect, be honest, do those hard things.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's important.
Yeah. And it's a process, man.
It is.
Like I thought I knew myself really well a few years ago. I didn't know anything. I was that guy. I was like, I just want to work all the time. I don't need to go out and be social. And like I would, and still genuinely, even in hindsight, I'm like, I wasn't unhappy doing that. I'm a lot more happy now that I have a better balance, and I still work a lot. I'm still alone a lot, but I am also social every now and then. That it's, my understanding of myself has evolved a lot over time. And I think, at least I hope everybody's like that. It's probably not just me, that it's a learning process, and you're going to think you have it figured out. And then you're going to get smacked in the face and realize like, oh, wait, I've been doing this in a way that doesn't actually align with what I really want, what really makes me happy. And that's fine. Like life is short, but it's also, you got lots of time to figure it out. And, we don't need to stress about being perfect with all these things immediately. It's a process, So
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, we touched on a lot of good things about the environment, training, nutrition specific, right? That's the meat and potatoes of that too. But importantly, like you said, it comes down to too, just that process, the learning. And I think to end and to kind of give some food for thought and maybe some action points for the listeners, I think we talked a lot about, like I said, external and internal environment, but I think and how it affects you. But it's also very important how you carry yourself and how that affects your environment around you, right? I think we need to be better at lighting other people's candle, lighting other people's happiness, being that person, right?
yeah,
That's like going to start a conversation. That's going to do the hard thing or speak up when it needs to be spoken up, right? Do these hard things that maybe people are just afraid to do because, again, these walls or the way the world is nowadays in quotation, it's just
yeah,
whatever excuse, right? I think we just need to be better. And I think that's a call to myself too. I think that's something I'm trying to be more intentional about too. But I think let's bring everyone else on board too. Let's be
yeah,
better human beings. Let's understand that. Let's understand how we affect our environment, how our environment affects us, and let's just keep doing the damn thing.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That can be in the career field that we're entering. That can be difficult, because
Yeah.
it can feel very competitive, and you're competing, quote unquote, for people's attention online, or for reads on your paper, or citations, or coaching clients, or whatever. But you're so right, dude. I mean, rising tide raises all ships, dude. And there's plenty of people out there to read all the papers and listen to all the podcasts. And, every coach can have a full roster. It's just, but it's not easy. We could probably do a whole episode just talking about that stuff. The
Really
sort of
can.
the flip side of what this one has been. Maybe that's not a bad idea.
That's pretty good. Look at all these ideas. Look at them.
Yeah, here we go. More content ideas. That's what we need. But yeah, I mean, that's great. And I think that's a great point to end on, of just being thoughtful of all that stuff as well. So yeah, man, I hope that we covered a lot of ground here. I think we talked about a lot of really good things, and hopefully there's some useful nuggets for people that they can take away. And even if they don't make any changes to what they're doing, just have some food for thought. Like you said, have some home baked goods, some Colby cookies to
Cinnamon rolls, even.
think of. Bro,
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
everything
Yeah.
sounds so good. No, but yeah, some good food for thought to kind of chew on and think about, and just reflect, and am I going about all these things the way that I want? Does this feel good and right and aligned for me? Is this causing issues with the people that I care about, in all these different domains? And it's going to be a process to fine tune stuff. It's going to change over time a lot, like we've been saying, but very worthwhile going down that journey.
100%. And hey, we're going on that journey, and we'll see everyone else along the way. So thank you all so much for watching. Catch you at the next one.